Hi, and welcome to SpondyCast, where we bring together the best medical minds, thought leaders, scientists, patients, and caregivers to inform and inspire the spondylitis community. I'm your host, Jill Miller, living my best spa life, knowing that how we meet today has the power to change everything going forward. Hi, and welcome to SpondyCast. Today, our guest is Iris Zink, who has been a rheumatology nurse practitioner for 23 years and was president of the Rheumatology Nurses Society. She has traveled extensively lecturing on a variety of topics pertaining to arthritis, women, autoimmune diseases, laughter for healing, and intimacy and chronic disease. She's published numerous times on topics about patient care and intimacy, and co-published the chapter on HIV and arthritis in the Scope and Standards Rheumatology Nursing text. She's an adjunct faculty at Michigan State University, a very passionate teacher, lecturer, and caregiver. In 2016, her and her husband opened the first nurse practitioner-run early arthritis clinic in Michigan to provide access to care for those individuals who are underserved or underinsured. To date, she has 4 rheumatology nurse practitioners, 3 nurses, and 6 nursing students in practice, and over 4,500 active patients. And I will also say that you are the author of Sex Interrupted. We'll get more into that. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm excited to have this conversation on intimacy and spondyloarthritis and the relationship topic. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I will say, I want you to tell us your story of how you became so passionate about intimacy and relationships related to chronic disease, because your experience that I've read, when you had your aha moment, I had a similar one. So I want to hear yours first, and then we'll talk about the one I had.
So the story in the book is that as I was working in my former practice, not the current Medicaid clinic, but I was working in my former practice, and I saw a 54-year-old teacher just for a recheck for ankylosing spondylitis, has your medications going, a regular old recheck. And then, of course, I got 3 kids, got to go get a soccer practice, doing the whole thing. So I'm working my way out the door. I grabbed the door handle, and she's like, I got one more question. And I said, okay. And she said, I can't open my legs wide enough to have sex with my husband. And so then I sat down, because I knew this was going to be a longer conversation. And she was fused with her sacroiliac joints, so she really could not open her legs wide enough to have sex with her husband. So I kind of did this silly dog look, like I tilted my head and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I said, let me think about this. Is that okay? And she's like, oh yeah, sure. And because I didn't know the answer immediately, which I think a lot of healthcare providers then shy away from the conversation at all. But I just said, can I get back with you? And she said yes. And so because I was on the lecture circuit at that point in time doing other things, I had a lecture in Lansing at a restaurant, and a local DO, an osteopath from Michigan State University, came to the lecture. And I said, hey, Adam, after the dinner program, can I ask you a few questions? One of my patients is having some sexual health issues. Adam didn't know me from anybody. And he's like, oh, okay. So I talked to the osteopathic doctor for a while after the lecture. And I said, listen, she's 54. She wants to have intimacy with her husband. She literally cannot get her legs open wide enough to have intimacy with her husband. So can you help me? And he said, oh, sure, then no problem. He said, send her out to Michigan State. We'll see what kind of flexibility she has left. I have a physical therapist that I work with at Michigan State. We'll get her, together with that person. And so I called Mary back and I said, listen, I met this guy. He's a DO at Michigan State. He's got a, pelvic floor physical therapist that he works with. We're going to get you hooked up. Is this okay? And she said, yeah, that sounds great. So she came back and she said, as long as she was doing the home therapy exercises, she was fine. But I kept asking her every time, how is it going? And if she fell off the wagon, things were not fine. But the aha moment it was when I thought to myself, if this person is having trouble, how many others are having trouble? So I called my local librarian, Judy, thank God for Judy. And I said, can you get me every article that's written about sex and arthritis? And so she said, sure. An hour later, she called me back and she said, Iris, there's like nothing. There's like 6 articles. She said, I know you're not going to be happy. So she said, I widened search. And so I just got every sexual health issue with a, sexual health issue with a health related issue. So any chronic illness related to a sexual health issue. She said, that's 600 articles. And I said, okay. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I'll take them. So I read every single thing I could get my hands on, and actually made a trip up to Toronto, Canada, to talk to an author of the book, an intimacy book, who was a pediatrician, amazing. And I went up and talked to her, and I just collected as much information as I could. And I started asking more and more patients about their experience and whether they were having sexual health issues. And it just opened this giant floodgate. And so I thought it was going to be really smart. And then I was going to start having lectures for patients about sexual health concerns and issues of intimacy. Well, then nobody showed up. Like, I advertised, I got the local hospital to have me. Nobody showed up. And I'm like, okay, so these people don't want to talk about sexual health. But when I started talking to groups of nurses, it was just a hit, because nurses were so scared about talking to patients about sexual health issues that it just sort of exploded. And then the whole focus changed. So if I could teach healthcare providers how to talk about intimacy with their patients, and it didn't matter, rheumatology, primary care, didn't matter, then we could get the mission started.
I can only imagine. And I will say, when I read, or I was listening to some of your, when you presented at the Spondyloarthritis Summit a couple years ago, and did a talk on this, I actually had a visceral emotional reaction to that story. Just as a woman and someone who believes that intimacy is a really big, important piece of our lives. And when it reminded me recently, when I was doing some research for this, I was part of a patient advisory group on spondylitis. And we were in this room, and there were people from all over the globe, and we had translators, and everyone's having this conversation. We're doing this whiteboard session on what do you experience with spondylitis? And I was with a group of people, and there were men in business suits and somebody finally raised their hand and said, well, yeah, it was an open question, but it was, I don't have sex, or I have problems because of it. And it's hard enough without a chronic disease and with children and all these things. And one of the things you talk about a lot in your work is starting with communication. And as the patient, maybe you're stuck a little bit. We might be in the middle between, we have to facilitate the translation with our provider and with the people in our lives. So tell me a little bit about communicating around this topic.
Okay, so the bigger part of the story was, after I helped Mary, I called the librarian and asked her what publications existed on intimacy and chronic disease related to arthritis. And there were 6 articles back then. But she had 600 articles on how chronic illness of any sort, like sleep apnea, blindness, mastectomy, post-hysterectomy, had impacted chronic, how sex had impacted chronic illness, or vice versa. So I got all 600 articles, started doing all my research, had planned on doing lectures for patients about intimacy so that I could help patients navigate that journey. And the patients didn't show up for the lectures. But who was most interested in my lectures were nurses. So I turned out to start traveling around the United States and lecturing to groups of 250 nurses at a time about how important it is to talk about this subject. So there was this huge, there was just nobody talking about sex. There was nobody knowing how to talk about sex. And after my lecture, nurses would always come up to me and say, if there was only a book, about how to do this, I would talk to my patients, but I don't feel comfortable. And I'm like, you've got 6 kids. What do you think? What are you talking about? You don't feel comfortable, because you don't have to know the answers. It's about starting the conversation. So going back to your point of communication, that's the most important thing, because being diagnosed with a chronic illness, is bad enough, like you said. And spondyloarthropathy is my favorite illness to treat by far, because like you said earlier, it takes 9 years to get diagnosed. I mean, it's ridiculous. And women are crazy, and women have fibromyalgia, and it's all in your head, and there's nothing wrong. So, my favorite patients are the ex-drug addicts, the ex-alcoholics, because they were self-medicating. Nobody was listening to them. They come to the clinic, or they've been stuck in the pain clinic for years, getting SI injections and cortisone injections, or having back surgery that didn't work. So these are the patients that I am most passionate about, because they're the ones who need the most support. And by the time they've gotten to the clinic, intimacy is gone. I mean, a lot of times they've already had a loss of a relationship because there was no communication. They hurt all the time. They can't sleep. You're getting out of bed every hour and a half to stretch. I mean, so, there's just so much to go back and kind of rebuild.
Yeah. And one theme that kept coming to my head, we can maybe punt this a little further down, but there are a couple themes around this of sometimes when we get to a point where the intimacy is gone, like we think something's wrong with our body, or we think our partner thinks something's wrong with our body. And I almost thought, as I was listening to an interview you did recently, and you do touch on this, is there's shame around this topic. And there's a lot of right, I imagine there could be a lot of self-work as and whether it's right cognitive, or there are a lot of, it's not just the intimacy is gone for a period of time and then you just turn it back on.
Nope.
In a relationship. And how do you approach people around those things? And I know you talk a little bit about you can't be the guy that hasn't touched his wife in 10 years and then go home and go, okay, here we go.
Yeah, here's my big erect penis. Let's put it in. No, that's not going to work.
So what are the issues to overcome, and addressing those and systematically to get back to where you want to be?
I think it's all got to start with communication. So that's the biggest thing. I do like it when my whoever I'm taking care of, whether male or female, whatever it is, they bring their partner to the office visit. I like that, because then when I breach the subject, then everybody's hearing the subject, which is really good. On our new patient packet, we have a line that says, are you having any issues with sexuality, or is your sex life satisfactory? So, that they know from the very first visit that I'm open to that, not to mention the fact that my book is standing on the front counter when you check in. So they know that I'm open to that idea of talking about sexuality. But I can imagine, if you're a 24-year-old girl and you're going in to see a male rheumatologist, that is going to be super intimidating to bring that conversation up, more or less, how am I going to talk to my partner?
Yeah. One of the really interesting things I think about is what happens to us in our brains and our bodies when the intimacy is there. And tell me a little bit about, the power of human physical connection and the two, right? The organs. I think you talk about the organs.
The brain and the skin. Exactly.
Yeah. The brain and the skin.
Just the act of intimacy, whether you get to an orgasm or not, just the act of the kissing, the hugging, and the touching, that alone raises your serotonin, it raises your oxytocin. So, that's creating bonding. So that's the problem, is if there is no physical touch between you and your partner, the bond is lost. Even in the animal community, you see this all the time. If the mom is paying too much attention to the baby and the dad's not getting any attention, he's going to eat the baby. So, that's the problem, is that we crave that affection and that attention, whether it is intercourse or if it's hugging and touching. And then when there's concerns about performance and being able to have whatever intimacy means to you, and you're concerned about hurting your partner, your partner's already exhausted and you don't want to ask for that, then the partner who has the chronic illness is going to feel like damaged goods.
The the damaged goods thing, that kind of, right, that hits home, because I think many of us have been there who are in this community. In terms of reviving that, is it just the intimacy? Is there, I guess let's talk, do you want to talk tools
Mhm.
to get there? I mean, I think there's a variety of different ways. I didn't think I'd be as shy talking about this topic, because I'm pretty direct. But I've read in some of your work and in general, people, if you right, if you don't have intimacy and you want to move toward that, it's you have to practice it. And
Right.
aside from communication, you have to try first, you don't succeed.
Right.
Uh, because what are the overall benefits to the disease, I guess? Like, right, pain control or
Right. So my favorite is the Rutgers study where they put ladies in a functional MRI machine. So, and the ladies who were, they were in there by themselves. Okay. So there was no partner in there with them. So the ladies who achieved an orgasm then had 110% pain reduction, which lasted a period of 24 hours. So we know that if you can get to the part where you're having an orgasm, that your pain threshold will go up tremendously. It's not everybody's going to be able to have an orgasm, but just the bonding, the physical holding hands, that too releases positive endorphins as long as you like your partner. That's the other thing, is that I've had ladies come into my office and say, I don't have sex anymore, and then I unpack further and they hate their spouse, and I'm like, well, you're probably not going to have much of a sex drive if you hate your partner. So there's a lot of things that are involved with that. But I think just taking away the shame, like you said, my favorite thing is to stand up in front of a huge audience and give a lecture, and then there is a nun in the front row. And the nun comes up to me afterwards and says, thank you so much for teaching me where my G-spot was. Nobody's ever done this before. So like epiphany moments, like I'm like, oh no, there's a nun and she's approaching me. Oh gosh, this is going to be awkward. And everyone's just so grateful for the education, I think, is the thing, because so many people don't get that kind of education. My daughters, they taught abstinence in their very progressive high school. That was the method of birth control they taught. So, and I was too rogue to be the sex ed teacher. I tried, but I was too liberal. They were not going to let me do that. So, it's about releasing the shame. Intimacy is how we all got here. Okay. We were all born because somebody had sex, right? And people are doing that all the time at all ages. And so it's just about getting over that hump. I love Europe. Europe is so much more open to this. Ireland, they have huge billboards where gay men are holding onto each other and, talking about intimacy and arthritis. And that is so fabulous. Whereas in America, it's just such we don't talk about nudity and we don't talk about intimacy at all, which is really frightening.
no. I mean,
yes.
We could get down a whole nother rabbit hole here.
Whole nother thing, but you asked me about tools. So,
yeah. So I think you're right. We have to talk about it. So I'm glad you're here today.
Yes. Yes. So tools can range from just education about where is your G-spot, where are you going to get pleasure from? And look, thank God for Netflix. I mean, there are so many Netflix shows now about sex, which is fabulous. There's a Masters and Johnson one. There is one about how Gwyneth Paltrow is on one about how to achieve intimacy and orgasms. And just, there's so much more access than when we were 20 years ago, where it was reading a book in the library, right? So now it's a lot more available to talk about things like that. But, culturally, we just have not done a good job of educating our younger people about intimacy and the power of orgasm.
Yeah. And one of the things we have talked about on many episodes is diet and the role of having a better outcome around the disease in general. So does diet play into our ability to be intimate?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And do you think I have my list right now? I don't have my list on me, but there are many foods that you can do to help your sex life, like dark chocolate, things like that, things that help with your libido, for example. So that helps. But the most important thing with spondyloarthritis is eating an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's what I was thinking about when you asked me about the tools. The first tool is getting your disease under control. And so getting over that fear of taking medication and not being reliant on medication alone, because it's not going to get better if you just think the Humira is going to make it better. Okay, that the Humira alone is not ever going to get you in remission. It's just not a thing. It's not that great. I mean, it's a good drug, but it's not that great. None of our drugs are going to get you in remission alone. So it's really going to be the diet and the daily exercise and the meditation and having, some stress reduction techniques, and then the medication. And I love the idea of acupuncture, and I love the idea of whatever else you can do to help keep yourself in remission, and taking 2,000 milligrams of turmeric, and, doing all of the things to get your body to where it doesn't hurt 24/7, because you're a lot more likely to think about having intimacy if you're not hurting every day.
Right. And you talk about, in one of the things I listen to, you talk about DHEA, the sex hormone, being higher or lower in people with the disease, or?
So the DHEA is just a lab test that I check, and you can Google it. It's got a name that's like a billion. You'd win a spelling bee if you could spell that. So DHEA is a lab test that your doctor can order, and 400 is normal for a teenage person, and 35 is normal for an 85-year-old person. Okay, those are the normals at my lab. But traditionally, when I see a patient on the first visit, I do the DHEA level, because it's affected by stress, it's affected by diet, and it's also affected by medications like antidepressants and gabapentin and Lyrica and Norco and things like that. So I kind of want to know where we're starting from, because if your DHEA is in the teens, which it is, I would say 75% of the time, I'm showing people their DHEA level, and I'm just aghast that they're even getting out of bed in the morning. Because DHEA is not only your estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and your good cholesterol, it's your mojo, it's your vitality, it's your energy. If we were in Chinese medicine, we'd be talking about it's your chi, right? So you have a huge chi deficiency. You're not having enough energy to even get out of bed in the morning, more or less have wow time. So, getting that fixed, and the fix to DHEA, so you can't find a provider to do it. Everybody is like, I don't know what that is. So you take 2 grams of fish oil daily, and then your DHE goes up, and you stop taking medications like gabapentin and Lyrica if you can stand it, because those are lowering your DHEA, and then eating as much omega-3 and 6 is possible in your diet. So salmon once a week, avocado every day, quinoa, anything that you can do to boost your omegas in your diet will both help with lubrication, which is super important, and also help with your mojo.
So you just convinced me to make sure mine's getting checked.
Well, even if your provider won't check it, just start taking 2 grams of fish oil, really good quality fish oil, and then ramp up that diet. And then sugar is the devil. Sugar is so inflammatory, and we are so addicted to sugar. And just getting that out of your diet is going to make a huge difference too.
Yeah. And you just gave us the best reason for when your doctor says drink your fish oil every day. I keep a bottle and I chug it out of the bottle in the mornings. I have no qualms, but I wasn't taking the pills. But okay, so because I think too, right, the DHEA, if your vitamin B or D is low, you're going to
also feel like crap.
So it may be one more thing. We'll just go to the old adage of what gets measured gets managed, right?
Right, exactly.
Trend or baseline. Okay. Tell me about water and hydration, if you have thoughts. It's one of my biggest, I think it's one of the biggest secrets to having a positive outcome with the disease.
It's, again, I think the right word was hydration. Very interesting. You're going to hear me talk about Chinese medicine, because my husband and I just started taking classes in Chinese medicine. So 5 years from now, we'll have a whole nother conversation about acupuncture and herbology. So But in China, people drink tea all day and they eat soup every day. And in America, we don't do that. So it's really about hydration. I love green tea because it's super anti-inflammatory. It helps your metabolism. It's good for you. It's an antioxidant, So again, atherosclerosis can contribute to erectile dysfunction. So let's just, so green tea would be lovely. Water, coconut water with no sugar added in it. It's just really about making sure you're getting enough hydration, because if you're not, then you will not have lubrication at all. Zero.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be like, and again, you should be using a whole bunch of lubricant anyway. And there's so many more lubricants than there ever were before. It used to be KY jelly and that was it. And now there's so many options, which is fabulous, including hyaluronic acid, suppositories, and everything that's natural and pH balanced, and so many options. Coconut oil, it's cheap, so you can use anything you want to use, but you're gonna have to use lubricant, especially if you haven't been intimate in a while.
Yeah, and there are, for people who are sensitive, there's
so good
non-silicone based, there's water based, and in terms of that, you talk also sometimes about, as you're choosing a lubricant, the if you've got cracked skin, you may not want to pick certain things. So talk a little bit about maybe the bombs that you might hit if you pick the wrong lubricant.
Right. So there are things that have cinnamon in them, God forbid, because that is very caustic to your vaginal area. It's okay to ingest cinnamon, but you don't want to put it down there. There are things that have mentholatum in them, which is KY, his and hers, that because some ladies do need that extra tingle, but if you have any, friable skin because you haven't been intimate in a while, that's going to sting, and you're going to be standing in the shower going, that's kind of a mood wrecker. So I would stick to what is natural and what is available first. I love the Puromance because it's a water-based lubricant and it's pH balanced and everything like that. But there are so many. There's Goody. There's just, like I said, there's so many that have hyaluronic acid in them now. You can really get a lot. And then coconut oil. I know a lot of ladies that just use coconut oil for lubricant.
I suppose on the topic of lubricant, so if you are, because I imagine primary symptoms, one of them is dryness, and especially as women age. Do you recommend that just like you take your fish oil every day, if you're having dryness, do you use lubricant, even not when you're being intimate?
That's why I love the hyaluronic acid suppositories, because you can put those in 2 or 3 days a week. You can buy them off of Amazon. You just Google hyaluronic acid. It starts with an R. I'm having a brain fog day. But there are multiple hyaluronic acid suppositories that you can get even on Amazon, and you can put those in every other day, so that you can keep that lubrication going, so that if the mood strikes, that you're going to be prepared.
Right. And I think even with the omega-3s and outside of intimacy, I think of hydration as what we're putting in, and then we have to I eat my omega-3s and then we put a lot of lotion on. So it's no different. It's just kind of lubricating along the way. So
exactly.
And we have to be thankful for Amazon, or I think a lot of people have to be thankful for Amazon, because then you don't have to step into a store and have a conversation. But who would you talk to if you said, I want to look at our toys, our lubricants, the right thing for me? Where would one go?
That is a huge problem, because in my area, I send a lot of ladies to the pelvic floor physical therapist. I think that's a really good start, because there is no shame there. They are going to stick their fingers in your vagina and help you to dilate. They're going to help you with pelvic floor manipulation. They're going to help you with pelvic floor pain. So those ladies are a really good resource in your community. And I literally have Googled for patients who live, 2 hours away, pelvic floor physical therapist, in X city, and they will pop up, because there are not a lot of them, but there are usually ones in every major city. So the public floor physical therapists are a great idea. I think the gynecologists are better now at having the conversation than they used to be. There are sex therapists, and now we all have internet. Most people do. So there are sex therapists that you can have that conversation with. There's intimacy coaches. So there are more options than there ever were before, thank goodness. So it's not a taboo thing. It's just about finding the resources in your area.
And we've talked a lot about women. So for men, one of the most interesting things I learned was like kind of an aha moment. You talked about men who might have erectile dysfunction, but that I'm getting embarrassed, but it's like, it's not their penis that isn't working. It's maybe that there are some nerve issues in their spine that are causing that. And, how can they offset or like overcome, or maybe that's not the right word. How do they address that?
And for men, it's a lot more face. Like I think women are, in my experience, women tend to be more about the hugging and the kissing and that intimate kind of part. I know a lot of women who can't handle the penetration, and they're okay with that. As long as there is affection, they are okay, and they're okay with oral sex instead of penetrative sex, if that is okay. For men, I think there's a lot more self-esteem attached to inability to have an erection. So that is devastating. I think I've talked to so many men that say, well, I can't get an erection anymore, so I'm not going to date anymore. I'm not going to touch my wife anymore. I'm not going to touch my partner anymore because I can't get an erection. I'm like, what? Yeah, nobody misses that part. I have a ankylosing spondylitis patient in my office last week, and he told me that. He said, he's 50, he's my age. He's 54, I think 53, 54. And he said, well, my date doesn't work, so I'm not going to date anymore. I'm like, oh, no. You have so much more to offer. You're a nice guy. You can fix things. You're sweet. You have money. You can take women out. You can be kind to them. I don't think it's about your dick.
No, it's not. Okay, so dating. Let's talk about this. And I'm going to throw myself under the bus, right? I'm a single girl with ankylosing spondylitis. And for me personally, I tend to talk about the diagnosis up front, like by date 2. I know not everyone's comfortable, but at this point you can Google me and find out that I'm all over the internet talking about spondylitis. So I have no secrets. But when would people want to talk about this, particularly if maybe they do have an issue, or do you have any advice there?
I have lots of advice there. I think that everybody has something. I think that, you're not wearing a sign that says I have herpes on your forehead. I think every single person has something. So to think that you're going to meet somebody without a chronic illness is kind of not a thing anymore. Based on our sad American diet, pollution, autoimmune nightmare that's happening in the world, most people have something. And if they don't have it, their mother had it or their sister has it, because so many people have autoimmune disease, and people who have autoimmune disease tend to have multiple autoimmune diseases. So, I don't think that you have to be tragically embarrassed that you have something, because most people have something or know somebody that has something. And because now we're not 20 years ago, so we actually have medications that can really help to get people closer to remission, that it's, not doom and gloom. If you're not telling someone I'm going to be in a wheelchair and you're going to have to take care of me and I'm probably going to be on disability anymore. Most of the patients that I take care of are between 26 and 35, and they look like you. They're otherwise healthy. They just have arthritis, pain, and flare-ups. So, I think it's a whole different ball of wax now than it was 25 years ago, when people were on walkers and wheelchairs and on oxygen, and just it was a bad time. So we're very blessed that we have multiple avenues of medication and alternative therapies. If you're not going to do the medication route, at least you're doing something. So I think there should not be shame or guilt involved in seeking out intimacy with another person, because most people have something. And I think second date, third date's appropriate. Hey, I just wanted to have a conversation with you. I've been dealing with this for a while. Pretty much got it under control. If you have more questions, or you want to come with me to my doctor's appointment, or you feel comfortable coming with me, and that would be great. So
yeah, and I'm a transparency person on that stuff. So
absolutely, I'd rather them go away in the beginning than find out later and go away.
Right, because it's same thing. I mean, I'm the same professionally about it now. So okay, so I want to circle back, because I think this is probably one of the really important things, particularly when you have a disease that's characterized by SI joint issues and lower back. When you talk about women, there is a power in the word Kegel. So do you recommend that for all the women in your practice?
All the women and all the men. They started teaching men Kegel exercises before prostate surgery to hope that they had some recovery after surgery. And if you've read my book, there's a very revealing story about my husband. My husband had prostate surgery for enlarged prostate, and afterwards it didn't go well. His surgical outcome was not what we expected. It wasn't what we had planned. We're only 5 years into the marriage, and he's wearing a diaper, and he's bleeding, and he's passing clots, and he's catheterizing himself, 6-8 times a day. And it was a freaking nightmare. And so he, of course, is just beside himself, and he's not healing after the surgery. And so finally I said to him, we got to get some blood flow down there, babe. We got to get blood flow down there. I'm sorry. He's like, I don't want to be touched. I'm wearing a diaper. I'm bleeding. I'm like, don't really care. So let's just try this experiment. I'm going to give you a hand job every other day for 10 days straight, and let's see if we can get some blood flow down there. Changed his diet, hand jobs. He is fine now. He doesn't need Cialis anymore, the whole thing. But his doctor didn't talk to him about that. His doctor didn't talk to him about blood flow and healing and changing your diet, making sure you're eating an anti-inflammatory diet. His doctor was like, oh shit, that didn't work out as well as we had hoped,
But if you needed blood flow in your foot, you'd get a foot massage.
You sure would.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, I know. And, acupuncture. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to increase circulation, especially in women's vulva, women's vaginas. You need circulation down there if you're having any hope of having an orgasm. So if you're not practicing or having like 30 minutes of foreplay, it is not going to happen. So there has to be a great deal of massage down there to get the hope of blood flow going down there.
Okay, and so let me ask this question. I'm going to create a scenario. So I'm a woman who is having trouble with intimacy, or a man, still feeling like I'm lacking sexual desire. My partner doesn't like me. Would it be normal in protocol, or maybe like I'm having pain during sex? I don't know why. Would you recommend that to a patient that, okay, well, if you're not feeling with your partner, it is part of your overall health to find intimacy and touch. And do you recommend like leading up to that with a lot of masturbation?
Self-massage, right. Well, and I have ladies that come in and they tell me they're virgins, and that's frightening because they're 45. And then they have a new partner, and I'm like, woo, please do not have sex with them first. So, because if you're not using a dilator, it's going to be really painful. So yeah, you first have to figure out what it takes to orgasm. If you don't know what makes you orgasm or what turns you on, then how are you going to explain that or guide somebody else to do that? So, I think self-pleasure is very important. And thank God people made shower heads that come down and you could direct the water to the blood flow to have an orgasm. Or you can buy toys on Amazon. I mean, or you have fingers. I had a patient who was a quadriplegic, and he always wanted the same nurse to come and give him his neck and shoulder massage every night. I'm like, he's totally getting off on that because the only feeling he had was nipples up. And so he wanted the same nurse every night. And so I'm like, yeah, he's getting off. So, which is fine, totally. As long as everybody knows what's going on, that's totally fine. But we can't forget that people with quadriplegia are still having sex. I mean, Superman had babies after he became a quadriplegic. So everybody's still having sex.
So have you done any tracking of where people began in terms of intimacy or a marker like DHEA and over time when they are having more intimacy, and does the disease severity go down?
Oh, I think definitely. So I have not done that personal research study, but
I can't see that research.
I'm certain that it does, but I think more than anything, it's the normalcy. So, yeah. So Jackie's my friend from California. She's a nurse practitioner out there, and she's always reminding me about normalcy. That's what people want to get back to. When they're diagnosed with a chronic disease, everybody just wants things to go back to normal. And normal is sex for some people, not for everybody, but intimacy is normal for a lot of people, or that has been a normalcy for them. So it's just about getting back to that state of, we're twice a weeker on the sex, and making sure that you have time to have sex and that you are rested enough to have sex, which is big in these relationships. I mean, that's the other thing, is if you're the only person who's taking out the garbage and the recycling and making the kids lunches and doing all the laundry and doing all the cooking and you're working full time, it is not going to happen. So the best thing that a partner can do is unload the dishwasher. I mean, that is the sexiest thing my husband ever does, is unload the dishwasher.
And it's, as I always say, it's never just about the dishwasher. That's where communication comes in, right? I like that one for you. Okay, so you have a list of tools you call sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Should we just review those before we?
Do you have that in front of you?
I do. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please read them, because I do not have my book right in front of me.
That's okay.
Sense of humor, I know, is very important in tools and education, but I can't remember all of them.
Yeah, so the tools are called the sheets, and they consist of S for self-confidence and sense of self, hugely important. Humor, we need that. We'll come back to that. Enthusiasm, drive, and desire. Education, tools and the support system. Spirit, and some patience. Patience is going to be a big one. Humor. I think we have to learn to laugh at ourselves too.
Right. Somebody's going to fart. Somebody's going to fall off the bed. Something's not going to work.
Right. And
so things happen. So, you have, if you go into this, there's all this pressure, then that's not going to be good. We're doing this to have fun. This is adult playground time. Okay. Kids get to go play on the playground. Adults get to have playground time in the bedroom. So, this is playtime. It's not supposed to be stressful.
And you almost get like the double whammy because, right, like orgasm and laughter are two of the things that like are the best part for our basic body systems. So if you can do both at the same time, I bet you highly encourage that.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm trying to think, what else do we need to cover? Because I know I took us in the weeds a lot, but this is I think it's a topic that people don't want to address, but everyone is curious, right? What do I do if I'm not feeling great?
I think what we didn't cover was the, Viagra, Cialis medications for men, the medications that help to increase blood flow to the penis. So that is important in that, again, for men with ankylosing spondylitis, it is a spinal issue. So blood flow can help if they're not getting erect enough to have penetration, if that's what they desire. But the problem is that I find that, the good old boys network, they kind of jab each other's show, all right, you have a prescription for Viagra, but nobody's doing any education about how to use them. So Viagra doesn't work the first time you take it, and nobody tells anybody that. And so a lot of times I have met men who threw the rest of them in the toilet and flushed it because it didn't work the first time. It's called a first pass effect. Your body sees a medication for the first time and it goes, don't know what that is. I'm just going to pee that off. So the first time you take it, it doesn't work. It doesn't really work very well on a full stomach. So if you drink alcohol and have a full meal and then you think your Viagra is going to work, it's not. It's much better to take that on an empty stomach before you have a full meal, so you have the sex before the date. Okay, if possible, yay. So, just about things like that. And then I've also had people that tell me, oh, those pills don't work for me. And I'm like, were you sitting there watching? I mean, because if you're waiting for it to become erect, it's not going to. You have to have stimulation. And people are thinking like this big boner is just going to pop right up. And it's not a thing. Like, it has to still have blood flow and circulation in order for the medication to have any chance of working. So I think there's a huge education piece there. I think women are still sad because there's not a Viagra for us. They did Addie, but too many side effects, not enough bonus out of that medication for my personal recommendation. I think for women, it's a lot more, getting to the place where you're relaxed and you feel confident about your body and you feel like, you trust the person that you're having intimacy with. And then you're used to having blood flow to your vulva and your clitoris. And, all of that is much more important than having Viagra type medication. And now there are tools that actually provide suction. So you can get a vibrator that actually will provide suction to your clitoris, which will then help it engorge with blood, helping you maybe get an orgasm faster.
Those are all great advice. And you talk a little bit about the box, right? Is it the box?
Nothing box.
The nothing box.
That's the problem. Yes, because women think we're really good at multitasking. And I've told my husband that a billion times. I'm like, I'm so good at multitasking. And he says, honey, you have really bad ADD. You are not good at multitasking at all. You're doing 15 things, but you're not doing any of them great. Stop doing that. So, if we tend to be in this, like, I'm unloading the dishwasher, I'm getting the groceries, I'm thinking about what I'm making for the kids' meal for the next day. I'm thinking about this lecture. I mean, if you're laying in bed and you're thinking, oh God, the kids are going to come home in 15 minutes from soccer practice, you're probably not going to have an orgasm with your partner. You have to have time. You have to have the recycling out on the curb already, so you're not fixating on, oh, I'm going to forget to put the recycling out on the curb. You've got to just be in the mindset of, oh, I love the way my partner smells and I love the way my partner feels, and we have time to relax and I'm not exhausted, and let's do this. You have to be in the nothing box, because if we're thinking about tomorrow and next Tuesday and other things, then it's never going to happen. You're never going to get to orgasm.
Yeah. And at the risk of making my mother finally hear that I actually do have sex for the first time in my life, I agree. The nothing box is where the magic happens for women, at least this one. I think it's just, we do, and I do the same thing. We go and go and go. And sometimes breathing or mindfulness, right? Being present in the moment. That is also, there's some work to be done there for many of us. So, okay. So the one thing as we wrap up, because I know we've gone long, and number one, I think, what is your best piece of advice for someone, like one-liner? What's the best piece of advice about getting things going again?
I think that you need to have a conversation with your partner while you're fully clothed. I think that is the most important thing. So you are in a space where nobody is holding technology and nobody's in front of the television set and there are not children around. So maybe you're on a date. That's a really good thing. You're in a restaurant, nobody has technology, there are no distractions, and you say, I miss you. I miss it when we used to. I love the way you look, smell, feel. I want to get back to that level of intimacy, but I am scared. Can you help me? Can you help me get back to where we used to be when we had passionate sex when we first met? I want to get back to that, but I'm scared and you're scared. And so how can we do that?
that last question should almost be at the front end, and then we're going to take everybody through it, right? Sorry. Chauncey, if you can rearrange, that'd be awesome. Okay, so on that note, I'm gonna tell you how grateful I am, because I would love to see your second book, which I think should be a compilation of stories from people who have worked through this, right? Because we want to provide hope more than anything, and hope tends to be its own medication.
Right. See, that's your book, Jill. You're the one who lives with this every day. So that's your book. Your book is about how, you can have a diagnosis of a chronic illness and still make this happen.
4 times. Yeah. That was kind of a pun, but okay, super. So Iris, this has been fascinating. And next time I'm headed up to Michigan State, I'm going to come and visit you.
I wish you would come see the clinic. It's an amazing place. We started with 3 employees and now we have 16.
I will be there the second week in September for 2 days. So
all right, you're coming in.
Pop it on my calendar, and we're gonna have a conversation. And I'm gonna get my DHEA done before then. But thank you. Like I have to say, this has been probably one of the funnest. Oh, Chauncey says part 2 we can do in September.
Okay, perfect.
We are so grateful for people like you in the community that do offer these. You offer not only hope, but like real practical ways to get your life back. And thank you for the commitment and all the work you do. I'm grateful for you and just this time with you.
Thank you. So if your people have more questions, Sex Interrupted, you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it when you come to my office. I'll autograph it for you. But I think that is a good place to start. The only criticism that I've gotten for my book, which was from Mariah, who also runs This Point Forward, which is her website about getting pregnant with autoimmune disease, was that my book talks about doing other things instead of penetration. And she said, we got to have penetration in order to get pregnant. I said, okay. So we did a whole podcast together. It's on one of my YouTubes, but it's so there needs to be a second edition. But yes, so Sex Interrupted has all kinds of advice about how to live with chronic disease and still maintain intimacy.
Awesome. And are you on social media? Where can we find you, or on YouTube?
I do have a YouTube channel, but my daughter recorded 6 YouTubes, and then COVID happened. And that's the problem with the book. Got published in December of 2020. So it kind of just laid there having a pandemic around it. So there was never a book tour or anything because it happened at that time. And I am certainly moving on with my career, trying to get my patients another avenue of treatment with acupuncture and Chinese herbs, and finding out what more I can do for people. So I have really been focusing on what is next for my career and how I can help patients in a different way.
All right, awesome. We're gonna do a part 2 for sure. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
SpondyCast was made possible by donations from the Spondylitis Association of America's individual members and our show's corporate sponsor, AbbVie. Since our founding in 1983, the Spondylitis Association of America has been the face, voice, and leading nationwide nonprofit educating, empowering, and advocating for people living with spondyloarthritis. Through our extensive work with patients, the medical community, and partners, we provide information and resources to help people impacted by the disease live better lives and champion research to find a cure.